Everyone, it's me, Max, back with another book video. Thank you all for the support on the Facebook video, and I thought I'd do another one, because that's how you grow a channel, right? Make more content. This book video is different to the last one, slightly. Instead of being a list of my favourite books I've read, this is books that I am yet to read, but want to read. As in, I'm going to make it my goal to read these books this year. These are my high priority books. So, without further ado, because I don't want this being as long as the last one, let's get into it. Okay, so the first book I want to read this year is Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. When I say first book I want to read, I've already read some books this year, but this is the first book, in this pile I really want to read. So, James Joyce, I've read Ulysses, which is my biggest flex. I didn't understand it, but I've read it. And I've read Dubliners, which was okay. This is the other one of his works that is comprehensible, because I don't have a clue what Finnegan's Wake is. I've read the first part of it. It's nonsense, in the best possible way, obviously. But so this is the last of his ones that's like relatively easy to get into. This is a precursor to Ulysses. Follows Stephen Dedalus, the character from Ulysses, the best character from Ulysses, and it's essentially old Jimmy Joyce talking about his life. Essentially, Stephen Dedalus is obviously James Joyce, and that's what it is. It's him as a student and such, and I really like James Joyce's writing. I don't like the stories he writes all the time, because I wasn't big on Dubliners, but I think he was an excellent writer. And especially, I'm not really big into writers like pre the 1950s, really, outside of Dickens and a couple others I can, just a few. So, for that, this author, Joyce, obviously has a very special place in my heart for the fact that I enjoy reading his writing despite it being very old. This book is over 100 years old, which obviously there's nothing wrong with old media and art and whatnot. But in terms of books, I struggle to get into older, seriously over 100 years old books, unless they're like Charles Dickens, who I've never had an issue with. So that's the first book. This next one is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Of course, I'm a pretentious hipster literary uni student. I've got to read this book. It's a rite of passage. Come on, everyone who is a pretentious literary hipster English student needs to read this book. We all know probably what this book is about, vaguely, because I don't really know that much. I just know it's about a group of pretentious literary students, and someone gets murdered. That's my knowledge of this. It's a dark academia. I don't subscribe to aesthetics and such. If you do, that's fine, but I just, that's not my thing to label myself an aesthetic and have everyone to read and listen and dress like based off. So, if you do, that's dope. It's just not my sort of thing. So I'm approaching this from a very outsider perspective, because I don't care for the aesthetics and the TikTok stuff of that sort of thing. So I'm approaching it as a book. And Donna Tartt is good friends with Bret Easton Ellis, who is actually, I believe, at the very start, it's dedicated to Bret Easton Ellis, who, if you watch my last video, is an author, not a person. I don't like him as a guy. Is an author I love. And this is sort of implied to take place at the same college as The Rules of Attraction, which is my favourite Alice book. So that'll be quite cool. It's quite long. I don't do long books particularly well. Next one is a book that I'm not too sure how much I want to read it in terms of practicality, but it sounds really cool and I've heard it for ages. It is The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. I believe I'm saying that right. This is also a very famous Russian piece of literature. Lots of Russian history associated with this, due to the fact that, when this book was written, I believe it was illegal to be, or at least it was very much frowned upon, to be religious. I believe this comes from the Stalinist regime. I've never actually read Russian literature before. It's a blind spot because it looks like something I'd love, but I've just never read it. So I think this one seems like something I would like the most, because it's a magical realist type of story about basically the devil showing up in Moscow. Moscow every state. It's one of those books where it's like it doesn't tell you much about it before going in, and you're not supposed to know that much about it. So I'm leaving it there. But it's I believe it's magical realist, I think. So next one, Sad Girls Everywhere Rejoice. I want to read The Bell Jar. I've never read The Bell Jar, which I like depressing literature because that's such a unique personality trait. And especially depressing cinema, that's my jam. You know, that sort of thing is what I like. So this book is the iconic depression book. This is the depression book. Well, actually, to be fair, pretty sure Plath wasn't just depressed. She had like bipolar and stuff. But we all know this book. You know, tragically, Plath took her own life before it was even published, I believe. Same year it was published, 63, at the age of 30. And I've read a bit of her poetry. I'm not the world's biggest poetry person. She's very cool, but I don't get it, but I like it. So I want to read her one novel because it's also very short, and I have literally owned this book since like the second book haul I ever did, when I brought a bunch of books for the first time in like 2021. This was one of those books that I brought. I still haven't read it. I believe it's the only book of those that I haven't read yet, I think. So I'm going to try and get this done. I was going to read it last year, didn't get around to it. I'm going to try and read The Bell Jar. This might be the most obscure book on this list. This is Story of My Life by Jay McKinney. Jay McKinney is an author who was very prominent in the 1980s in the literary Brat Pack, which included Bret Easton Ellis and some other people who their names escape me. It's a movement that people don't really talk about that much, but he was one of the most famous. He wrote Bright Lights, Big City. In fact, I'd say he's like the only one out of those who became a big name was Bret Easton Ellis, but he's probably the second most famous. It's about, I believe, a supermodel or some sort of celebrity who, you know, does cocaine and stuff and parties and so on and so forth. So I think this has like that sort of edgy tinge to it that I like in literature. I like quite edgy stuff sometimes. So that's why I want to read Story of My Life. It's a very, very nice cover. Purple is my favourite colour, so I like the purple there. Next one, get your thinking caps on, because we are going to be talking about David Foster Wallace, the granddaddy of pretentious, smart, hipster literature. Not the granddaddy, but like the king of it. Infinite Jest. Haven't read Infinite Jest, and that is not on my high priority list because that is a challenge. This is his only other completed work of fiction, I believe, and that's why I want to read it, because I want to read some David Foster Wallace without having to read Infinite Jest. This one is not really talked about very often. I'll read the blurb. Mysterious disappearance of her great-grandmother and 25 other elderly inmates of a Shaker Heights nursing home has left Lena Stone-Cipher Beadsman, what a name, emotionally stranded on the edge of the Great Ohio Desert. Does Ohio have deserts, or is that made up for the book? I'm not American, but I always associate Ohio with, like, you know, not deserts. That's like California. But that is simply one problem of many for the hapless switchboard operator, seriously compounded by her ongoing affair with her boss, the TV stardom of a talking dog. It sounds weird. I want to read it. Dharma Bombed by Jack Kerouac. Kerouac is an icon, inspiration, legend, and I struggle to read him. I've tried reading On the Road 3 times now, and I just can't get into it. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to keep trying. But in the meantime, I've read The Subterraneans, which was good. This book is meant to be like very similar to On the Road, but Kerouac and his friends are all about like looking for enlightenment, I believe. That's where the Dharma comes from. It's basically to do with the Buddhism and stuff, or spiritualism, and I don't think you can see it, but my copy is like really, it's kind of damaged on the back. I don't know what that is. But anyway, that's this book, and Jack Kerouac, I really want to like Kerouac, so this one is also quite short, shorter than On the Road, so hopefully I'll enjoy this one. This is Don DeLillo, Americana. I mentioned Don DeLillo in my last video. So far I've read 2 of his books, White Noise and Libra. Americana was his very first one. It's about, I believe, an experimental filmmaker who packs up his job and goes on a road trip. that is basically all I know about it. I really want to read some Don DeLillo, and this one feels the most enticing. It's a very thick book, and I need to read more postmodernist authors. You know, I need to become more pretentious and read more postmodernism. Next one is a classic book, Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. Never read it, barely even know what it's about. I only, like I said, barely know. But I've heard it compared to Kurt Vonnegut a lot. And I love Kurt Vonnegut. He's my favourite writer next to Ellis and a few other people Pynchon probably. So what I want to read Catch-22, you know, it's a good middle of the road between the classics and the pretentious postmodernist type stuff. So that's what I want to read. Also about a bombardier named Yossarian, who is frantic and furious because thousands of people he has never even met keep trying to kill him. Sounds very Pynchon, Vonnegut-esque. Main character, you know, the characters in it of like are iconic, like Major, and like say Yossarian. So that's that book, Joseph Heller. We need to go back to whenever this book was published. The Odyssey by Homer, not Simpson. Anyway, you all know what the Odyssey is. Very famous book. Wish to read this because Ulysses and Big Down Song, It Looks Like Up to Me by Richard Frenia are both based on it. Ulysses more so. Classic, it's Greek. Homer's The Odyssey. So I want to read that because I've never read Greek literature before. So I'm pretty sure it's ancient Greek. I've never read that sort of thing before. So there you go. And the last one is an extremely heavy book. Don Quixote by Cervantes. I don't know if I'm going to read this one, but I really want to. It's really long, but it seems really cool. It seems very funny. And it's one of the few books of its era, you know, because I don't do well with super old literature. This one, which is basically a comic tale about a picaresque rogue hero, just sounds hilarious. But there's a couple other books I want to read that are quite big. But I believe that if I'm going to do one massive book a year, this is the one I'm probably going to try this year. I've heard only great things about Don Quixote. That's not true, actually. I've heard people don't like it, but for the most part, people think this is a great book that still holds up. So, we'll be the judge of that. So there you have it. Those are the books that I want to read this year, the high priority books that I want to have read by the end of the year. What books do you want to read by the end of the year? You know, let me know in the comments. That's what we say on this website. So, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Stay beautiful.